All she wanted was $50 to feed her baby. But the message went to a stranger. A billionaire. And that single mistake became the start of a miracle. You're not ready for what happened next. So subscribe, hit the bell, and let's begin. The city of Axiom never truly slept. It was a labyrinth of steel and glass where dreams were both made and shattered. In the shadow of its gleaming skyscrapers, in a neighborhood where the buildings leaned against each other for support, Sienna's day began not with an alarm, but with the soft, hungry whimper of her son. The first sliver of morning light fought its way through the single window of her small apartment, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like forgotten hopes. Sienna was already awake, had been for hours, her mind racing down a familiar, terrifying path. Calculation. She stood in her tiny kitchenette, a place that held the ghost of 1,000 meager meals, and performed her daily ritual. She pulled a near-empty can of formula from the cupboard, its metallic echo sounding like a death knell in the quiet room. With hands that trembled slightly, she scooped the very last of the powder into a bottle. It was barely enough for one feeding. A deep, cold dread settled in her stomach, a feeling that had become her most constant companion. This wasn't just about hunger. It was about the fundamental terror of being unable to provide for the one person who meant everything. Her son, Prince, lay in his second-hand crib, his chest rising and falling in a peaceful rhythm that felt like a miracle against the backdrop of her anxiety. He was a beautiful boy, with his father's eyes and her own stubborn curl in his hair. Looking at him could both break her heart and mend it in the same instant. He was the reason she fought, the reason she endured, and the reason the silence in the room was so deafening. Her gaze drifted to her old cracked smartphone on the counter. It was a relic, a device that held more pleas than pictures. She picked it up, the weight of it feeling immense in her hand. Her thumb scrolled through a one-sided text conversation with a man named David. Her messages, sent over the past 2 weeks, were a timeline of despair. David, you promised. I really need that $50. Please, just answer your phone. David, this isn't for me. This is for my son. He needs to eat. The last message had a single gray tick. Undelivered. He had been a coworker, someone she'd trusted enough to lend her last $50 to when he'd had a family emergency. He had promised to pay her back in a week. That was 3 weeks ago. Last she heard, he had landed a new job opportunity in another city. A week after that, his number was dead. The betrayal was a sharp, bitter pill. It wasn't just the money. It was the theft of her trust, the shredding of the last fragile safety net she thought she had. Prince began to fuss, his cries growing from whimpers to a full-throated demand for food. The sound jolted her into action, shoving her despair down into a deep hidden place. She warmed the bottle, her movements mechanical, and lifted Prince into her arms. As he fed greedily, she whispered to him, her voice a soft counterpoint to the city's growing rumble outside. Sure, it's okay, my love. It's okay, she cooed, kissing his forehead. Mommy will figure it out. She always does. But the question hung in the air, suffocating. How? Later, on her way to her low-paying job as a cleaner in a corporate office, she clung to a strap on the crowded bus, her body swaying with its lurching movements. The faces around her were a mosaic of similar struggles. Tired, resigned, determined. Then she saw him. Ben, a friendly face from her old workplace, was sitting near the back. A flicker of hope, fragile as a candle flame in the wind, sparked within her. She pushed her way through the packed aisle. Ben. Hi. He looked up, a smile brightening his face. Sienna. Long time. Ben, please, she said, her voice low and urgent. Have you heard from David? Or spoken to him at all? Ben's smile faded into a look of sympathy. David? Oh, he moved out to Northridge for that new job. Didn't he tell you? Sienna's heart plummeted. He changed his number. I think. Yeah, he got a new one. He gave it out at his farewell drinks. Said he was starting fresh. Ben scrolled through his phone. Here, I think this is it. He showed her the screen. Sienna's hands trembled as she typed the digits into her own phone, saving it as David knew. The question mark was a silent admission of her dwindling hope. Thank you, Ben. Thank you so much, she said, her gratitude genuine but edged with a fresh wave of anxiety. She carried that number with her all day like a secret talisman. As she wiped down glass surfaces in the skyscrapers that housed people like Lysander Vance, she rehearsed what she would say. She wasn't a beggar. She was a creditor. She had to hold on to that dignity. That night, the apartment was silent again. Prince was asleep, his belly full for now, but the emptiness of the formula canister on the counter was a glaring accusation. This was it. There were no more options, no more friends to ask, no more corners to cut. She picked up her phone, the screen glowing in the dark room. She opened a new message to the number Ben had given her. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. How do you plead for your child's survival? How do you convey the sheer gut-wrenching terror without sounding like you're falling apart? She typed a formal message, then deleted it. It sounded too cold. She typed an angry one, then deleted it too. Fear would only make him defensive. Finally, she just let the raw, unfiltered truth flow from her heart through her fingertips. Her message was long and emotional. David, I know you traveled, but this is Sienna. I have been trying to reach you. You promised to pay back the $50. I would not be bothering you like this if it was not a matter of life. My son, Prince, has not eaten properly because I have no money to buy food. The little I have is finished. I am begging you as a mother, please send the money. It is for my baby's food. He is hungry and I have nothing to give him. Please. She read it over, her vision blurring with tears. It was her truth, laid bare. There was no pride left, only a mother's desperation. She took a deep, shaky breath and pressed send. The word, delivered, appeared instantly. She placed the phone on the counter and stared at it, as if her will alone could force a reply. The seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. Her entire world, her son's well-being, now hinged on a response from a tiny, glowing screen in the dark silence of her apartment. The weight was a physical pain, a tight coil of hope and dread in her chest, and the hook for everything that was about to change forever. The silence in Lysander Vance's penthouse was not merely an absence of sound. It was a presence. It was a thick, expensive silence, curated by soundproofed walls and floors that cost more than most people's homes. It was a silence he had once craved, a refuge from the clamoring voices seeking investments, favors, a piece of his fortune. Now, at 2:17 a.m., it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a gilded cage. He stood before a wall of glass, looking down at the city of Axiom. From this height, it was a tapestry of lights, a circuit board of anonymous lives. He saw the pinpricks of cars on highways, the glowing windows of all-night offices, but he heard nothing. He felt nothing. The $12 billion company he'd built, the art on his walls, the fleet of cars downstairs, none of it could fill the hollowed-out space where a life used to be. His phone, a private device known only to a handful of trusted people, vibrated softly on the marble console behind him. A flicker of annoyance. It was too late for business, too early for anything else. He considered ignoring it, but a lifetime of seizing opportunities, no matter how small, was a hard habit to break. He picked it up. The message was long. A wall of text from an unknown number. His first instinct was to delete it. Another plea, another sob story, another hand reaching for his wallet. But his eyes, trained to scan complex data sheets and legal documents in seconds, caught a few words that made him pause. "My son has not eaten, begging you, my baby's food. He is hungry." It was the word baby that did it. It was a word that had no place in the cutthroat world of venture capital and corporate takeovers. It was raw, primal, disarming. This wasn't a request for a business loan or a donation to a faceless charity. This was a direct cry from the trenches of a reality he had spent years insulating himself from. He read it again slowly this time. He parsed the desperation in the poor grammar, the unpolished plea. This was not a professional beggar. This was a person who had reached the absolute end of their rope. The name David was mentioned. It was clearly a mistaken identity. The sender, Sienna, believed she was texting someone who owed her a paltry $50. $50. The amount was an insult to the scale of her desperation. He spent more on a bottle of wine he wouldn't finish. A part of him, the part that had built an empire on cold, hard logic, told him to simply reply, "Wrong number," and block it. It was the efficient thing to do. The smart thing. But another part, a part he thought had been buried under layers of wealth and cynicism, stirred. It was a memory of a time before the penthouse, a faint echo of a life where money was counted in coins and a hot meal was a victory. He thought of the sterile, silent expanse of his home. He thought of a child, somewhere in the city below, who was hungry. His thumbs hovered over the screen. He typed the logical response, "You have the wrong number." He stared at it. It felt like slamming a door in the face of a drowning person. He deleted it. He tried again, his message clinical and final. "This is not David. This is a wrong number." He hit send before he could change his mind. Back in her apartment, Sienna's phone buzzed. She snatched it up, her heart hammering against her ribs. The hope was a physical pain. When she read the message, the air left her lungs in a defeated rush. The fragile world she had built around that delivered notification shattered. It was over. The final door had been slammed shut. A hot wave of shame washed over her. She had poured her heart out to a complete stranger. Her humiliation was now someone else's late-night curiosity. Tears she had been holding back for days finally broke free, silent sobs that shook her shoulders. She was utterly, completely alone. She was about to throw her phone across the room in a fit of despair when it buzzed again. Another message from the same number. Why $50? The question was so simple, so unexpected, it stopped her tears midstream. It wasn't an offer. It wasn't a rejection. It was a question. A request for her story. In that moment it was a lifeline. Drying her eyes on her sleeve, her fingers trembling, she began to type. She told him about David, the broken promise. She told him about Prince, his name, his smile, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her. She didn't just say she was poor. She described the cold fear of staring at an empty cupboard. She typed and typed, a torrent of words she had kept locked inside for so long, spilling out to a nameless, faceless stranger in the digital void. Lysander watched the 3 dancing dots on his screen, a modern-day symbol of anticipation. He poured a glass of amber whiskey and sat down, his eyes glued to the phone. Her story came in fragments, in emotional bursts. It was unvarnished and real. He learned about her son, Prince. He learned about her job as a cleaner, the same office building he owned a majority stake in. The irony was not lost on him. He was learning about the life of one of the invisible people who maintained the world he inhabited. He wasn't having a conversation with a charity case. He was having a dialogue with a person. A strong person. A fighter. Her texts weren't just pleas. They were a testament to a resilience he found himself admiring. She wasn't asking him for anything. She was just answering his question. For the first time in years, someone was talking to Lysander Vance not as a billionaire, but as a human being. And for the first time in years, he was listening. The dynamic had shifted. He was no longer an unwilling recipient of a misdirected plea. He was a willing participant in a secret midnight conversation. He asked another question. What does Prince like to eat when you can afford it? Her reply was immediate, filled with a mother's love. He loves mashed bananas. And he makes such a happy mess with it. Lysander looked around his pristine, spotless penthouse. He tried to imagine the sound of a child's laughter, the mess of mashed bananas on his marble floors. The image was so foreign, so beautiful it ached. He didn't send money. Not yet. That would have been a transaction, and this had become something more. It was a connection. A tiny, fragile thread of humanity stretching from his silent, lonely tower to her desperate, love-filled apartment. He simply typed back, "Tell me more about him." And Sienna, with a heart that was suddenly a little less heavy, did. The billionaire and the single mom talked through the night, not about money, but about mashed bananas, first words, and the crushing, beautiful weight of love. The hook was set. The real story, the one that would change both their lives forever, had just begun. The fragile connection formed in the quiet of the night faced its first true test with the rising sun. For Sienna, the morning brought no relief, only a sharpening of her desperation. The text conversation with the kind stranger, a man she knew only as a wrong number, had been a beautiful, temporary escape. But reality, cold and unyielding, was waiting for her when Prince woke up. His usual bright gurgles were replaced by a weak, listless cry. His forehead was warm, too warm. Sienna's heart, which had felt so light just hours before, plummeted like a stone. She pressed her lips to his skin, a mother's primitive thermometer, and knew instantly. This was no minor fussiness. This was a fever. A serious one. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed at her throat. A doctor. The free clinic was miles away and the wait could take all day. The nearest hospital? The mere thought of the bill made her dizzy. She had nothing. The last of her money had gone to the electricity bill, saving them from darkness but leaving them defenseless against this new crisis. Her hands shook as she prepared a cool cloth for Prince's head. The texts from the stranger were still on her screen, a testament to a fleeting moment of kindness. But kindness wouldn't bring down a fever. Kindness wouldn't pay for medicine. The crushing weight of her situation returned, multiplied tenfold by the sight of her suffering child. In a moment of pure, unadulterated terror, her composure broke. She picked up the phone and typed. Her messages to the stranger no longer composed stories, but frantic, punctuated bursts of fear. My baby is sick. He's burning up. I don't know what to do. I can't afford a doctor. I have nothing. I'm so scared. Please, if you can, just pray for us. I have no one else to tell. She didn't ask for money. She didn't demand help. In her utter desolation, she asked for prayers. It was the raw, unfiltered cry of a mother facing her worst nightmare alone. In his penthouse, Lysander was beginning his day with the quiet precision of a well-oiled machine. His personal assistant had just outlined his schedule. Board meetings, merger talks, a charity gala, all of it meaningless noise. His mind was still in the dark, quiet intimacy of the previous night's conversation. He was thinking of mashed bananas and the sound of a child's laughter when his phone buzzed with a succession of frantic messages. He read them, and the corporate titan, the man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, felt a jolt of genuine alarm. This was no longer a story. This was an emergency unfolding in real time. The clinical detachment he had maintained vanished. The thought of that little boy, Prince, the one he felt he had come to know, being sick and without care, was unbearable. He didn't hesitate. He didn't consult anyone. The man who overanalyzed every investment made the most impulsive decision of his life. He typed a message, his commands clear and direct, leaving no room for misunderstanding or refusal. This is no time for prayers. It is a time for action. Send me your bank account number. Right now. When Sienna saw the message, a different kind of shock washed over her. This was a demand, not a request. The tone was so different from the gentle curiosity of the night before. It was the voice of a man used to being obeyed. Through her haze of fear, a sliver of defiance, born of a lifetime of hardship, made her hesitate. Who was this man? What did he want? Sending a stranger her bank details felt like a monumental risk. But then Prince let out a weak, painful cry that shattered all her resistance. What choice did she have? What was her pride against her son's health? With trembling fingers, she typed out her account number, each digit feeling like a surrender. She sent it, then added a single heartfelt line. Thank you. Whatever you can do. God bless you. She expected nothing. Perhaps he would send the $50 she had originally asked for. Maybe 100. It would be enough for some fever medication at least. She held Prince close, rocking him, her phone discarded beside her. She had done all she could. 5 minutes later, her phone, set to silent, lit up. Then it lit up again. And again. A series of rapid silent notifications flashed across the screen. Curiosity overcoming her despair, she picked it up. The first notification was from her bank. Then another. And another. With each one, her breath hitched. She fumbled to open the banking app, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. Alert. Credit transaction. Amount. $5,000. Alert. Credit transaction. Amount. $5,000. Total account balance. $10,000. The world stopped. The sound of Prince's cries, the rumble of the city outside, everything faded into a dull hum. Sienna stared at the screen, the numbers blurring as her eyes filled with tears of utter disbelief. She blinked, sure she was hallucinating from stress. But the numbers remained. $10,000. It was an amount she couldn't have saved in a year. It was a fortune. It was a miracle. A new text arrived from the stranger. Take him to the best hospital. No. Do not worry about the cost. Just go. A sob ripped from Sienna's chest, a release of all the fear, the tension, the hopelessness of the past months. It was a cry of pure, unadulterated relief. She clutched Prince to her, weeping into his warm hair. Everything is going to be okay, my prince, she whispered, her voice breaking. Everything is going to be okay now. She grabbed her bag, her hands still shaking, but now with a frantic, joyful energy. The storm had broken. A stranger, a wrong number, had reached across the void and thrown her a lifeline just as the waters were about to close over her head. But as she rushed her son to the hospital, a new bewildering thought began to form in the back of her mind. A question that would define the days to come. Who was this man? The private hospital room was so quiet Sienna could hear the soft, steady beep of the monitor tracking Prince's heartbeat. It was a sound that, just hours ago, would have filled her with terror. Now it was a symphony of relief. Prince, washed, medicated, and rehydrated within 4 drip, slept a deep, peaceful sleep, his fever broken, his breathing even. The doctors had been kind, efficient, and asked no questions about payment after a quick, discreet phone call had been made to the administration. The world, which had been crushing her for so long, had suddenly become soft, accommodating, and safe. But safety, she realized, could be unnerving. Sitting in the plush armchair beside Prince's bed, the adrenaline of the crisis had faded, leaving behind a strange, buzzing anxiety. Her phone felt heavy in her hand. The screen still showed the bank alerts. $10,000. An amount so large it felt abstract, like a number from a financial news headline, not something that belonged to her. And with that number came the ghost of the man who had put it there. Who was this man? The question echoed in the silent room, growing louder with each passing minute. He wasn't just a wrong number anymore. He was a force. A person who could command a world-class hospital to admit a patient with a snap of his fingers. A person for whom $10,000 was a casual gesture. A solution to be deployed as quickly as one might order a takeaway meal. The gentle, curious man from the night before had, in the light of day, revealed himself to be a figure of immense, almost frightening power. Her mind raced through terrifying possibilities. Was this a trap? A cruel game played by a bored billionaire? Would he now demand something from her? Something she wasn't willing to give? The stories she'd heard about the rich and powerful were not always kind. Fear, cold and slick, coiled in her stomach. She looked at Prince, so vulnerable in his sleep, and a fierce protective instinct surged within her. No one, not even her savior, would threaten her son. Her phone buzzed. It was him. Her heart leaped into her throat. How is he? The question was simple, caring. It was the same tone from their first conversation. It didn't match the terrifying image her anxiety had constructed. Torn between gratitude and fear, her reply was cautious. The doctors say he will be fine. Thanks to you. I don't know how to thank you. Seeing him healthy will be thanks enough. The response was so gracious, so devoid of any expectation, that it disarmed her. Yet, the mystery was unbearable. She had to know. Gathering all her courage, she typed the question that was burning a hole in her mind. Who are you? Please, I have to know the name of the man who saved my son. There was a long pause. The 3 dancing dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. He was deliberating. This, more than anything, told her that his identity was a significant thing, a burden he did not share lightly. Finally, a reply came. It was not a name. It was a command. There is a coffee shop called The Daily Grind on the first floor of the Axiom Medical Tower. Be there tomorrow at 10 a.m. I will find you. The next morning, Sienna felt like she was moving through a dream. Prince was home, safe and healthy, being watched by a kindly paid-for nurse the hospital had arranged. Sienna had spent her last $50 on a new, simple but clean dress from a thrift store. It felt important to look like she had some shred of dignity left. The Axiom Medical Tower was a gleaming pillar of glass and steel, a monument to the wealth and health of the city's elite. The Daily Grind was nestled in its vast marble-lined lobby. It was bustling with doctors in white coats, smartly dressed administrators, and visitors. Sienna felt invisible, a ghost from a different world trespassing in this palace of privilege. She found a small table in a corner, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to stop them from shaking. She checked the time. 9:59 a.m. Her mouth was dry. What was she doing here? This was a mistake. She should get up and leave. At exactly 10 a.m., the atmosphere in the coffee shop shifted. It was subtle, but Sienna felt it. A quieting of voices, a few discreet glances towards the entrance. A man had walked in. He wasn't tall or overly imposing, but he carried an aura of absolute authority that seemed to part the crowd around him. He was dressed not in a flashy suit, but in impeccably tailored, dark casual wear that whispered of expensive fabric and discreet designers. His eyes, a sharp, intelligent gray, scanned the room and landed on her with an unnerving precision. He knew who she was. He walked towards her table, his movements calm and assured. Every eye in the place followed him, wondering who the insignificant woman in the corner was to warrant the attention of Lysander Vance. He stopped before her table. Up close, he was younger than she had imagined, but his eyes held a world-weariness that spoke of a life lived under immense pressure. "Sienna," he said. His voice was quiet, deeper than she expected, and it held no trace of condescension. She could only nod, her voice trapped in her throat. He sat down, not waiting for an invitation. "I'm Lysander." He didn't need to say his last name. In Axiom City, Lysander was enough. She had seen it on enough skyscrapers and business magazines to make the connection. Her savior was Lysander Vance, one of the richest, most powerful men in the country. The revelation was so staggering it was almost comical. The distance between her one-room apartment and this man's world was a chasm so vast she felt dizzy. I don't understand," she stammered, finally finding her voice. "Why? Why would you do this? For a stranger?" Lysander looked at her, a long, searching look. The corporate mask slipped for a second, and she saw the same loneliness she had felt in his texts. "Because your text was the first real, unfiltered truth anyone has sent me in years," he said quietly. "It wasn't a proposal or a request for funding. It was a human being in pain. In my world, that is a rare and precious thing." He leaned forward slightly, his intense gaze pinning her to her seat. "I didn't just give you money, Sienna. I made an investment." "An investment?" she repeated, confused. "In what?" Lysander allowed a small, genuine smile to touch his lips for the first time. "In you." The word investment hung in the air between them, as tangible as the steam rising from their untouched coffees. For Sienna, it was a word that belonged to the world of men in suits who populated the skyscrapers around them, a world of cold calculations and returns. To hear it applied to her life, her desperate situation, felt jarring. The initial wave of awe at being in Lysander's presence began to recede, replaced by a familiar defensive caution. Was this all just business to him, after all? "An investment," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. I don't have anything to invest." Lysander leaned back, studying her. He saw the wariness in her eyes, the protective shield that had snapped back into place. He understood it. In her position he would have been the same. "You misunderstand," he said, his tone measured, deliberately non-threatening. "I'm not talking about capital. I'm talking about potential. Your texts weren't just a story of hardship, Sienna. They were a demonstration of resilience, of integrity. You were pleading for $50 you were owed, not asking for a handout. You were focused on your son's survival, not your own comfort. That kind of character is the most valuable currency I know. It's a commodity in desperately short supply." He paused, letting his words sink in. The noise of the coffee shop seemed to fade into a distant hum. The $10,000 was emergency relief. "What I'm offering now is a partnership. A chance." He reached into his inner jacket pocket and pulled out a single crisp white envelope. He placed it on the table between them, but did not slide it towards her. It sat there, a silent promise and a test. "This is not more money," he said, correctly anticipating her reaction. "This is a fully paid, 6-month enrollment in the Axiom City Business Accelerator program. It's a pass to classes in finance, marketing, and management. It includes a mentorship from one of my senior executives. And upon completion, it comes with a seed grant to start the small business you wrote about, the one you dreamed of before life got in the way." Sienna's mind reeled. The business had been a fleeting thought, a line in one of her late-night texts about how she wished she could use her talent for baking to start a small home-based pastry shop, to build something of her own. She had mentioned it only once, in passing. He hadn't just been listening. He had been memorizing. Tears welled in her eyes again, but this time they were tears of a profound, overwhelming emotion she couldn't even name. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was recognition. He had seen past the struggling single mom and had seen a person with a dream, with potential. He was offering her a ladder, not just a safety net. Why? She asked again, the question filled with a new depth. Why would you go to all this trouble? For me. Lysander's gaze drifted for a moment, looking out at the polished lobby. I build things, Sienna. Companies, technologies, infrastructures. It's what I do. But somewhere along the way, I stopped building anything that truly mattered. I surrounded myself with people who saw the balance sheet, not the human being. Your text was a crack in that wall. Helping you. It's a chance to build something real again. To see a life changed, not just a profit margin grow. He finally pushed the envelope gently across the table. The choice is yours. No strings attached. If you take it, you will work harder than you have ever worked in your life. The program is brutal. But if you succeed, you will never have to worry about feeding your son again. You will have built that future with your own two hands. I'm just providing the tools. Sienna looked from the envelope to Lysander's face, then down at her own hands that were calloused from cleaning, but also capable of creating, of nurturing, of building. This was more than a gift. It was a challenge, a test of her own belief in herself. With a hand that trembled only slightly, she reached out and took the envelope. It felt heavy with possibility. I'll do it, she said, her voice gaining a strength he hadn't heard before. I won't let you down. Lysander gave a slow, approving nod. I know you won't. In that moment, an unspoken agreement was forged in the quiet corner of the coffee shop. It was not a contract between a billionaire and a charity case. It was a pact between two people from impossibly different worlds, who had each given the other something priceless. He had given her a chance, and she had given him a purpose. The envelope felt like it contained both a feather and a lead weight. A feather for the dream it represented. A lead weight for the immense pressure Sienna now carried on her shoulders. The Axiom City Business Accelerator was not a school. It was a boot camp for the ambitious, a gladiatorial arena where ideas were sharpened into weapons and only the strongest survived. Her first day was a lesson in sheer, unadulterated terror. The building itself, a sleek glass structure known as the Crucible, seemed designed to intimidate. The lobby was a vast echoing space where young, brilliant minds buzzed around in sharp outfits, speaking a language of burn rates, scalability, and disruptive paradigms. Sienna, in her one good dress, felt like a ghost haunting a future she wasn't meant to inhabit. Her cohort was a pack of 22-year-old prodigies, tech geniuses with trust fund safety nets and ideas for apps that solved problems Sienna didn't know existed. They were the Wunderkinds. She was the mature student, a label she heard whispered with a mix of pity and curiosity. Her assigned mentor was a woman named Anya Sharma, a former executive from one of Lysander's companies. Anya was a human razor blade, sharp, brilliant, and capable of cutting you to the bone with a single look. She had no time for sentiment. Your file says, home-based pastry shop, Anya said during their first 5-minute meeting, not even looking up from her tablet. Sentimental. Low margin. Unscalable. You have 1 week to give me a viable business model, not a hobby. Dismissed. Sienna left the office feeling like she'd been doused in ice water. This wasn't encouragement. It was a trial by fire. That night, in her apartment with Prince asleep, the fear returned, tenfold. The $10,000 was a lifeline, but it felt like a ticking clock. What if she failed? What if she proved all the whispers right? What if Lysander had made a terrible mistake? The old Sienna, the one from a month ago, would have crumbled. But the new Sienna, the one who had looked into the eyes of a billionaire and seen not a monster but a man, felt a spark of defiance. He saw something in you. Prove him right. She spent every waking moment studying. While Prince napped, she devoured textbooks on business finance, her head swimming with terms like cost of goods sold and gross profit margin. At night, after putting him to bed, she would bake, not for joy, but for data. She calculated the exact cost of every gram of flour, every egg, every drop of vanilla. She timed how long each batch took, optimizing her workflow in her tiny kitchen until she could produce a perfect dozen cupcakes in 47 minutes flat. She was running on 3 hours of sleep, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer will. The other students would go out for networking drinks. Sienna would rush home to put Prince to sleep and then log into the accelerator's online portal for more lectures. The isolation was crushing. She was too poor for their social life, too old for their cliques, and too focused on survival for their theoretical debates. The first major hurdle was the pitch presentation. Each student had 5 minutes to present their business to a panel of hardened investors, including Anya. The Wunderkinds had slick slideshows, 3D animations, and prototypes. Sienna had a PowerPoint she'd made on her phone and a box of her pastries. When her turn came, her palms were slick with sweat. She saw the bored, impatient looks from the panel. She began speaking, her voice shaky, reciting the numbers she'd memorized. It was dry, technical, and soulless. She was trying to be one of them, and she was failing. Anya held up a hand, cutting her off. "Stop. You're putting me to sleep. I've read your background. I know why you're here. So tell me, Sienna. Forget the margins for a minute. Why are you doing this? And don't you dare say to make money." The room was silent. All eyes were on her. The pressure was immense. She looked down at the box of pastries, and she thought of Prince. She thought of the hungry nights. She thought of the text that changed everything. Her voice changed. The tremor was gone, replaced by a raw, fierce conviction. "I'm doing this because I never want another mother to have to stare at an empty cupboard and a hungry child," she said, her gaze locking with Anya's. "I'm doing this because I learned that food isn't just sustenance. It's a, I love you. It's a, everything is going to be okay. That box doesn't just contain cupcakes. It contains comfort. It contains hope. My business isn't about pastries. It's about delivering a moment of peace, a small piece of joy, in a world that can be very, very hard. The numbers work. I've done the math. But the reason it will work is because everyone, rich or poor, needs to be reminded that they are cared for, even if it's just by a stranger with a cupcake." She finished. The room was utterly silent. Then one of the investors, a grizzled old man who had seen it all, slowly picked up a cupcake and took a bite. He didn't say anything. He just gave a slow, deliberate nod. Anya's expression was unreadable. "Finally," she said, a hint of something that might have been respect in her voice. "Some authentic fire. You may sit down." It wasn't a victory, not yet. But it was a turning point. Sienna had stopped trying to be someone else and had embraced the very thing that made her unique. Her story, her heart, her resilience. The fire that had kept her and Prince alive was now the same fire that would forge her future. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since she walked into the crucible, Sienna felt like she belonged in the fight. The small spark of confidence from her pitch presentation was immediately doused by the relentless downpour of the accelerator's next phase. It wasn't enough to have a compelling story. Now she had to prove it could work in the brutal reality of the market. This was Unit Economics Week, a period of such intense number crunching and supply chain analysis that Sienna felt her mind fraying at the edges. Her tiny apartment, once a sanctuary, was now a war room. Spreadsheets were taped to the walls, tracking the fluctuating price of butter and sugar. Her kitchen was a laboratory, every recipe deconstructed to the gram to shave off fractions of a cent. Prince's nap times were no longer for rest, but for frantic calculations. She'd rock him with one hand and scroll through wholesale vendor sites on her phone with the other, her eyes burning with fatigue. The isolation became a physical ache. The other students formed study groups, their laughter echoing from breakout rooms she felt too awkward to enter. They'd discuss their ventures over expensive lunches, while Sienna ate a sandwich she'd packed from home alone on a bench outside, the chill of the concrete seeping through her clothes. The whispers had evolved from curiosity to something sharper, more dismissive. They called her the baker, a label that felt less like a title and more like a dismissal of her ambitions. The breaking point came during a late-night logistics workshop. The topic was last-mile delivery solutions. A young man named Leo, who was pitching a drone-based delivery app, was holding court, explaining with arrogant flair how his technology would render all ground transport obsolete. Sienna, her mind hazy from 3 consecutive nights of minimal sleep, made the mistake of asking a practical question. But for small, immediate orders in dense city neighborhoods, like a box of pastries, wouldn't the cost of drone deployment be prohibitive? And what about weather conditions? A simple bicycle courier might be more reliable and cost-effective. The room went quiet. Leo stared at her with a condescending smirk. That's a very analog perspective, Sienna. We're building the future here, not optimizing for the past. Some of us are thinking bigger than cupcakes. The snicker that rippled through the room was like a physical blow. It wasn't just his words. It was the collective agreement of her peers. In that moment, she felt like an imposter, a charity case who had stumbled into a room of real innovators. The weight of Lysander's belief in her felt like a mountain on her shoulders. What if she was proving him wrong? What if Leo was right, and her dream was just a small, insignificant thing? She fled the room, the heat of humiliation burning her cheeks. She found an empty stairwell, sliding down the wall to sit on the cold concrete steps, pulling her knees to her chest. The tears came then, hot and silent. She was so tired, so alone. The dream felt too big, the path too steep. Her phone, her constant, burdensome companion, buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Lysander. Their communication had been sparse since she started the program, limited to a few formal check-ins from him. But this was different. Lysander. Anya tells me Unit Economics Week is breaking spirits. She also mentioned you asked a very sharp question about practical logistics today. Sienna stared at the message, her breath catching. How did he know? Was Anya reporting on her? Before she could form a reply, another message came through. Lysander. The analog perspective is often the one that finds the flaw in the brilliant idea. Don't let them make you doubt your instincts. Your strength is your grounding in reality. Theirs is in theory. In business, reality always wins. It was as if he had been in the room, as if he had reached through the digital void and placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. He wasn't offering empty praise. He was validating her intelligence. He was reframing her perceived weakness as her core strength. Sienna. It just feels so lonely. They all have each other. I just have spreadsheets. The reply came almost instantly. Lysander, you have me. 3 words. Simple, direct, utterly transformative. In the cold, dark stairwell, those 3 words built a fortress around her crumbling resolve. She wasn't alone. The most powerful man in the city was in her corner, not out of pity, but because he genuinely believed she was the one thinking clearly. Wiping her tears, she stood up. The humiliation was gone, replaced by a cool, focused determination. Leo wanted to build the future? Fine. She would build something that mattered today. She didn't go back to the workshop. She went home. She spent the night with Prince, reading him his favorite book 3 times, letting his simple, unconditional love refill her depleted spirit. The next day, she walked into the crucible with a new posture. She ignored the whispers. She stopped trying to join their conversations. Instead, she acted. She spent her lunch hours not hiding on a bench, but down at the local courier service, negotiating a bulk rate for local deliveries. She used her analog perspective to map out the most efficient delivery routes on a physical map of the city's downtown core, something no app could replicate with the same nuanced understanding of traffic patterns. When she presented her finalized business plan to Anya, it was no longer a plea for approval. It was a statement of fact. Her numbers were ironclad. Her delivery solution was cheaper and more reliable than any tech-based alternative for her specific model. Her Sienna's Sweet Solace brand was no longer just a name. It was a mission statement, backed by a ruthless and practical business strategy. Anya reviewed the document in silence, her sharp eyes scanning every line. Finally, she looked up. "The sentiment is still there," Anya said, her voice flat. "But now it's got teeth. And a very sharp business model to back it up. Good. You've stopped fighting who you are and started using it as your greatest asset. You've passed." It wasn't a celebration. It was an acknowledgement. But for Sienna it was everything. She had faced the storm of doubt and isolation, and she hadn't been swept away. She had found shelter not in a place, but in a person's belief, and in her own rediscovered strength. The baker was no longer just baking. She was building an empire, one perfectly costed cupcake at a time.
The email arrived with a simple, devastating subject line: Mandatory Accelerator Networking Gala. Sienna's blood ran cold. A gala. The word itself conjured images of a world she had only ever seen through windows. Swirling gowns, glittering chandeliers, the clink of champagne flutes, and the subtle, cutting language of high society. It was a world that belonged to Lysander, not to her. It was a world she had successfully avoided until now. Panic set in immediately. A dress. She had her one thrift store dress, now worn thin from countless washes. Shoes. Jewelry. She had nothing. The $10,000 was sacred, earmarked for business seed capital and Prince's future, not for a single night of finery. The thought of walking into that room, a starkly obvious charity case amidst the city's elite, made her feel physically ill. 4 days she agonized. She considered feigning illness. She thought about just not showing up. But the word mandatory echoed in her mind, a directive from the unforgiving machine of the accelerator. Failure to attend could mean jeopardizing everything she had worked for. In a moment of sheer desperation, she found herself typing a text to the only person who might understand the unique terror of her situation. Sienna. There's a gala for the accelerator next week. It's mandatory. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, then paused, as if he was weighing his response. Lysander. I am aware. I will be attending. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Of course he would be there. It was his world, his natural habitat. The thought of him seeing her there, exposed and out of place, was somehow worse than facing the entire room alone. Sienna. I can't go. Lysander. Why not? Sienna. I have nothing to wear. I don't belong there. They'll all know I don't belong. There was another long pause. Then a solution arrived, not as a command, but as a perfectly crafted logical offer. Lysander. Consider it a business expense. Image is a part of branding. For Sienna's Sweet Solace to be taken seriously by future corporate clients, its founder must look the part. My personal stylist, Chloe, will be at your apartment tomorrow at 10 a.m. Let her do her job. This is not a gift. It is an investment in your brand's perception. He had done it again. He had reframed her deepest insecurity into a strategic business move, giving her a ladder of logic to climb down from her pride. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering a business tool. She could accept that. The following day, Chloe arrived, a whirlwind of crisp efficiency and kind eyes. She didn't bat an eye at Sienna's small apartment. She took measurements, asked questions about Sienna's comfort level, and then vanished. 2 days later, she returned with a garment bag. The dress was not what Sienna had feared. loud, flashy, or overly revealing. It was a deep midnight blue, simple in its cut but crafted from a fabric that seemed to drink the light, shimmering subtly with every movement. It was elegant, powerful, and utterly her. There were also shoes, simple but exquisite, and a small, discreet clutch. "You look," Chloe said, a genuine smile on her face as Sienna stared at her reflection in the mirror, "like you own the room." The night of the gala, Sienna walked into the ballroom of the Axiom Grand Hotel on trembling legs. The room was a spectacle of wealth and power, just as she had imagined. For a moment she froze at the entrance, a mouse in a den of lions. And then she saw him. Lysander was across the room, surrounded by a circle of people vying for his attention. He was the sun at the center of this particular solar system. But his eyes, those sharp gray eyes, found hers instantly through the crowd. He didn't smile. He simply gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It was a soldier's acknowledgement before battle. "You belong here." That nod was all she needed. She took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the fray. She didn't try to mingle with the Wunderkinds, who were now looking at her with stunned, confused expressions. Instead, she found her way to the older, more established business owners, the ones who valued substance over flash. She talked about her business not with the frantic energy of a pitch, but with the quiet confidence of a craftsperson. She spoke of butterfat percentages, the perfect consistency of royal icing, and the logistics of delivering freshness. She was in the middle of a conversation with the owner of a chain of boutique hotels when she felt a presence at her elbow. It was Lysander. "Ms. Sienna," he said, his voice formal for the benefit of the crowd, but his eyes warm. "I was hoping to steal you for a moment. There's someone I'd like you to meet." He led her not to another business contact, but to a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The sounds of the gala faded into a distant hum. The night air was cool and sweet. "You," he said, turning to her, the formality gone from his voice, "are the most talked about person here tonight." Sienna's heart sank. "Are they laughing at the baker who got a makeover?" "No," he said, his gaze intense. "They are intrigued by the woman who outclassed everyone without even trying. They are talking about your poise, your knowledge, your quiet power. Leo has spent the entire night trying to get an investor to fund his drone fleet. You just secured a potential contract with the largest hotel chain in the city by talking about the emotional resonance of a perfectly baked scone." He took a step closer. The space between them crackled with a new, unspoken energy. "I brought you out here under false pretenses," he admitted, his voice dropping. "There's no one to meet. I needed a moment away from all of that. I needed to see the one real person in that entire room." Sienna looked up at him, at the city lights reflected in his eyes. The carefully constructed walls between benefactor and recipient, between billionaire and single mom, crumbled into dust in the quiet space between them. "Lysander, She began, but words failed her. He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was electric, a spark that ignited something that had been smoldering for weeks. "I know," he whispered. "I feel it, too." In the silence of the balcony, with the glittering city sprawled at their feet, the unspoken understanding between them finally found its voice, not in words, but in a shared, breathless look that promised a new, more complicated, and beautiful chapter was about to begin.
The morning after the gala, Sienna awoke with a feeling she hadn't known in years. A light, effervescent joy. The memory of the balcony, of Lysander's touch, of the unspoken promise in his eyes, played on a loop in her mind. Prince, sensing his mother's new energy, giggled and babbled as she got him ready for the day. For the first time, her future didn't just look secure. It looked beautiful. The crash was as swift as it was brutal. It began with a text from Anya, terse and uncharacteristically alarmed. "Check the Axiom Insider. Now." A cold dread trickled down Sienna's spine. The Axiom Insider was the city's most notorious gossip and business tabloid, a digital venom pit masquerading as journalism. With trembling fingers, she opened the site. The headline screamed at her in bold, black letters. "Vance's latest acquisition. From the boardroom to the bedroom?" Billionaire's charity case, single mom revealed as his newest secret. Beneath it was a photo from the gala. It was a masterclass in malicious framing. It captured the exact moment Lysander's fingers brushed her cheek on the balcony. The angle made it look far more intimate than it was, and the accompanying article was a work of pure character assassination. It painted her as a calculating gold digger who had used her sob story to ensnare the city's most eligible bachelor. It dredged up her past, mocking her dead-end job and her conveniently timed desperation. It called the accelerator enrollment a sham, a transparent excuse for Lysander to funnel money and resources to his mistress. The comment section was a sewer of vitriol, with people tearing apart her appearance, her intelligence, and her morality. The world tilted. The air vanished from her lungs. The beautiful, fragile thing that had blossomed on the balcony was now being dragged through the mud for the entire city to sneer at. The shame was so profound it felt like a physical blow. Her phone began to blow up. Unknown numbers. Messages from curious friends. A call from a furious Leo, screaming that her scandal was tarnishing the reputation of the entire accelerator cohort. The walls of her small apartment, once a haven, now felt like a prison, the outside world pressing in with its judgment and hate. The worst was yet to come. A few hours later, a new alert popped up. This one was a video from a celebrity news outlet. They had ambushed Lysander outside his corporate headquarters. A reporter shoved a microphone in his face. "Mr. Vance, care to comment on your relationship with Sienna Jacobs? Is it true you used the business accelerator as a personal dating service?" Sienna watched, her heart in her throat. Lysander's face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. He stopped, turning his steel-gray eyes directly into the camera. Her breath hitched, waiting for him to defend her, to deny the lies, to tell the world the truth of their connection. "Ms. Jacobs is a participant in a program I fund," he said, his voice clipped and devoid of all emotion. "I do not comment on baseless speculation about my personal life. My focus, as always, is on Vance Enterprises." He turned and walked away, his security team closing ranks around him. The silence he left behind was deafening. His words were a shield, a corporate non-statement designed to deflect and protect his empire. But to Sienna, they felt like a betrayal. He hadn't defended her. He had dismissed her as baseless speculation. The man who had seen her soul had just reduced her to a PR problem. The final blow came from a more intimate source. Her phone rang. It was the director of the prestigious private daycare she had just enrolled Prince in, using her first earnings from a small test batch of pastries. "Ms. Jacobs." The woman's voice was icy with disapproval. "I'm afraid we must rescind Prince's enrollment. We have a reputation to uphold for our families. We simply cannot be associated with this sort of public spectacle." They were taking her son's safe, happy future away. Because of a lie. That was the breaking point. The fear, the shame, the betrayal, and now the threat to her son. It was too much. This was the cost of stepping into Lysander's world. This was the price of their connection. She could fight for her business, she could endure the whispers, but she would not let Prince pay the price. With tears streaming down her face, her hand shaking so violently she could barely type, she wrote the hardest message of her life. "Sienna, I can't do this. I saw the news. I heard what you said. I understand you have to protect your company. But I have to protect my son. They took his spot at daycare. This world of yours. It destroys things. It's going to destroy us. I'm leaving the accelerator. Please, don't contact me again. Thank you for everything." She hit send before she could change her mind. Then she turned off her phone, collapsed onto her sofa, and wept, her dreams lying in ashes around her. She had chosen her son, but it felt like she had torn out her own heart in the process. The storm had hit, and it had washed everything away. The silence in Sienna's apartment was a living, suffocating entity. For 3 days she moved through the motions of survival, feeding Prince, changing him, holding him. But her spirit was a million miles away, buried under an avalanche of public shame and private heartbreak. The accelerator was a ghost in her past. The dress from the gala was shoved in the back of her closet, a relic from a life that wasn't hers. She had built a fortress of quiet despair, and she was determined to remain its only prisoner. She had just put Prince down for his nap when a firm, insistent knock echoed through the small space. Not a tentative tap, but a knock that demanded an answer. Her blood ran cold. Reporters. Creditors. She crept to the door, peering through the peephole. Her heart stopped. It was Lysander. He looked nothing like the polished billionaire from the gala. His hair was disheveled, his jaw tight with a raw, unvarnished intensity. He wore a simple, dark jacket, and his eyes, usually so cool and controlled, burned with a frantic fire. Sienna, his voice was low, strained, but carried through the door with undeniable force. Open the door. Please. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent, to let the fortress walls hold. But the please undid her. It was a crack in his own formidable armor. Slowly, her hand trembling, she unlocked and opened the door. He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over the small, tidy space, the evidence of her simple life, before landing back on her. The air crackled with all the words they hadn't said. "You turned off your phone," he said, the statement an accusation laced with pain. "I meant what I said," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself, a shield against the vulnerability in his eyes. "What you said was that you understood I had to protect my company," he countered, taking a step closer. "You were wrong. My company is steel and glass and numbers. It doesn't have a heart. It doesn't need protecting. You do. Prince does." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure frustration. "What I said to that reporter was the biggest mistake of my life. I was trying to shield you with corporate speak, to make the vultures lose interest. I was being a CEO when I should have been being a man. I should have looked into that camera and told them the truth." "And what is the truth, Lysander?" Sienna asked, her voice breaking. "The truth is that I love you." The words hung in the air, simple, direct, and devastating. They weren't a whisper on a balcony. They were a declaration in the harsh light of her reality. "The truth is that you are the strongest, most real person I have ever known. The truth is that I don't want a life in my empty penthouse if I can't share it with you and Prince. The truth is that your scandal is the best thing that has ever happened to me, because it forced me to see what really matters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I was a fool. But I'm not a fool who gives up." Before she could speak, he opened a live streaming app, and right there, in her small living room, he began to speak to the camera. "People of Axiom," he began, his voice steady and clear, his eyes locked not on the screen, but on Sienna. "My name is Lysander Vance. You've recently read lies about a woman named Sienna Jacobs. It's time you heard the truth." Sienna stared, stunned, as he proceeded to tell their story. Not the salacious tabloid version, but the real one. The wrong text. The hungry baby. The late-night conversations. Her intelligence. Her resilience. Her integrity. He spoke of her business plan with more pride than he'd ever shown for any corporate acquisition. "The only thing I'm guilty of," he concluded, his voice softening, "is falling in love with an extraordinary woman who was brave enough to text a stranger and strong enough to build a future from nothing. The accelerator wasn't a gift. It was an earned opportunity. My heart wasn't ensnared. It was won. Any outrage should be directed at me. forever making her doubt that for a single second. He ended the stream and put the phone away. The room was silent again, but the silence was now filled with the echo of his public unretractable vow. "Sienna," he said, closing the final distance between them. "The world knows my choice. Now you have to make yours. You can stay in this fortress, safe and alone. Or you can walk out that door with me, and we will face whatever comes next, together. But know this, I am not asking you to step into my world. I am asking you to let me into yours. Because your world, with all its struggles and its love, is the only one I want to be in." He held out his hand. It wasn't the hand of a billionaire offering a rescue. It was the hand of a man, offering his heart, his future, his everything. Sienna looked from his hand to his face, seeing not power or wealth, but the partner she had found in the dark, the man who had seen her, truly seen her, from the very beginning. The fear and the shame melted away, burned up by the ferocity of his love. A single, happy tear traced a path down her cheek. She didn't take his hand. Instead, she stepped forward, placed her hands on his face, and kissed him. It was an answer. It was a promise. It was the beginning. The scene is not a cold penthouse, but a warm, sprawling home with a large, sun-drenched garden. The sound of laughter fills the air. Prince, too, now sturdy and bright-eyed, is toddling across the grass, chasing bubbles blown by a smiling Lysander, who is down on his knees, his suit jacket long discarded. Sienna, glowing with a happiness that comes from within, watches from a patio table covered not with corporate reports, but with sketches for the third location of her now thriving Sienna's Sweet Solace boutique bakeries. Lysander catches Prince, scooping him up into his arms as the little boy shrieks with joy. He carries him over to Sienna, his free hand finding the small of her back, his touch still as electric as it was on the balcony. He looks at her, then at the son of his heart, then back at her. "I told you it was a good investment," he whispers, his eyes full of a love worth more than all his billions. Sienna smiles, a real, unburdened, radiant smile. The best one you ever made. And so, a single text message, sent to a wrong number, built a bridge between two worlds and created a family. A story that began with desperation ended with a love that proved no distance is too far, and no obstacle is too great, when two hearts are meant to find each other. Thank you for being a part of their unforgettable journey.